First of all, thanks to Ashwin for swapping slots with me. And I think a lot of the things he was saying there were really important. 2011 is probably the year where if you want to change the targets for the next 5 years, we need to be pretty clear what we want. So I think that's important research and worth debating later. I'd like to take it forward into this station area and what can we do to make our stations better. It was a report commissioned this time last year in rosier days, but it's not all about money, so don't despair. The next 10 years can be the decade of the station and certainly need to be. We've got a very modern train fleet across Britain. It's running pretty punctually. The assets are in good condition. The weaker link, perhaps, is the station, which was rightly prioritised lower whilst we were sorting out broken rails and modern trains. But I think its turn has now come. And as I say, they don't all have to be Liège, Guillaume type stations as this. But nice if somewhere. The report bases itself very much on Ashwin's basic research of what the passengers want. So we have a straight link here. And at that time, 80% journey satisfaction, now 83, I think. So that reflects the rise in punctuality into journey satisfaction. But it certainly doesn't reflect the rise in station satisfaction, which was and probably still is only 65%. So a third of people are not satisfied with the stations they pass through every day at the ends of their journey. And worse than that, within the station, only half of us are satisfied with the actual facilities we have, and particularly lousy toilets, particularly locked waiting rooms, car parks with potholes, etc., etc. So it's very much at the physical end. So this is very much a physical presentation of what is it we can do to our stations quickly and affordably to bring those numbers up. Because at some point, performance isn't going to get that much better than 94%, and we've got to look at other things where we can push on. And if we could get stations up to, let's say, 80%, we can start talking about an average satisfaction of 90%, which is where we should be, and where, by the way, the National Health Service is. So, mission, 80% station satisfaction. Solutions. Build on station categories, first of all. We cannot afford to make every station a palace. So let's sort out the ones which do need to be palaces and call them the A stations and arguably the B. And let's accept others want to be simple, smart and cheap. And you will not be surprised to know that the majority of stations are at the cheap end. So there are 25 major terminals in the country which do need to be absolute flagship standard. 66 near flagship stations like Clapham Junction, for example, huge numbers of people, but you're not going to get the same sort of revenue and property out of them as you are at Waterloo. And then at the bottom, more than half the stations are small, unstaffed, and of very varying categories. So first thing is to prioritise. And we've suggested having minimum standards to fit each of those priorities. So we define what the few flagship stations should have and provide those, and then we define what the very simple unstaffed stations should have and make life simple. The research suggests that it's first of all about access. You would be desperately unhappy if you got to the station and couldn't park, because your whole day is going to be wrecked. You may not have anywhere within easy access, and you're probably going to miss the train. You want all the information Ashwin's been talking about, and I totally agree with everything he said there, and how can we do it better and faster. Facilities, the waiting room, the car park, the toilet, the catering, and the environment. People, particularly women, do want to feel safe when they're using a station. They want to know their children are safe when they're using a station, and that means having a pleasant, graffiti-free atmosphere. So if we could get those four things sorted out on our 2,500 stations in the next decade, I think we would have made a big impact on customer satisfaction. Why didn't that move? Here we go. Our suggestion for the B stations was that they are never going to be self-funding, and some of them are really starting to decay. If anyone's seen Manchester Victoria, for example, or Luton, you'll know what I mean. And they did need special funding, and £50 million was earmarked from the Network Rail debt to do that, and detailed plans and negotiations have been in place. I think this is the area where we may see some delay.
No, I'm afraid this was precisely that got junked yesterday.
Yeah, well, dunk for today, but the world goes on. So the first challenge is these will need resurrecting, otherwise the stations just get worse, and the worst stations get worst of all, of course. So the simple challenge now is where the money going to come from these? Can we find solutions in retailing, in third-party money, or do we just wait to see P5 in 2014? There's no escape, and several people in the room come from the local authorities involved on that one. And the names of those stations, I think we all know, were Manchester, Clapham, Crewe, Warrington, Barking, Preston, Wigan, Luton, Liverpool, Stockport. In some of those cases, the TOCs will proceed with those, and it will happen. In others, there's going to have to be local authority money or government money, and we may have to wait. Fact of life, but let's keep them on the boiler so that we can do them when we want. The reason we need them is the research says there's absolutely no point in having a beautiful upstairs at Liverpool Central on Mersey Travel, for example, where they've got this amazing new shop and booking office combined, if downstairs feels like a medieval cellar. You will remember the medieval cellar, not the upstairs part. So we've got to be consistent when we modernise stations. And that one may well continue to be funded, I think, on a safety card, because you can imagine what that's like at 5 in the evening. This was 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and to have the busiest station in Mersey Travel with less than 2 metres gap between the track and the wall just is not on. Clapham Junction and Preston are ones you can wait for and do one day, but the principle increasingly in the research is as the nation gets older, it is very unhappy dragging suitcases up and down staircases, and in the case of Clapham, doing it with 1,000 other people per second on the same staircase. And we're going to have to look at more crossing bridges. We're going to have to look at escalators, ramps, lifts, etc. And you can see on the left there, the lifts are actually happening at Clapham, which is fine for the disabled, but it only takes, 10 people in a lift, and the other thousands of people are going to need a wider footbridge and an escalator, fact of life. And it'll either get paid for under a safety heading, or under a retail heading, or under a wait to 2014 heading. The A and B stations can earn the income to make their investments to a large extent. Marks and Spencers, etc., would pay something like £1 million a year to be on a big station with a big store, and that money can go back into a pot to do up the stations. So with A stations, property development and big retail works, and it is to a large extent a self-fulfilling prophecy. The smarter you make the station, the more Marks and Spencers are going to want to come, and the more they're likes, as in Sainsbury's, and the more they will pay. So I think with the A stations, it could be self-funding. In Network South East days, we used to say the excess profits from the A station went into a pot to do up the B stations, which is how we managed to do so many in the 1980s. Nowadays, of course, Network Rail or the train company tend to want to keep the profit from the A station, not put it in the B station, and then say, where's the money, government? So another solution is that there's less profit in the system, but A stations pay for B stations. C to F stations, I think it's all about simplicity. It's the Wakefield Kirkgates of this world. We cannot go on keeping these incredible 19th century edifices, some of which are listed, and that one is, most of which are not. And the secret, I think, is what the Dutch do, or the Swiss. They have got a programme of investing once in simplifying their stations, creating something modern, and it's all built around looking smart, having information, and minimising the 19th century facilities. And that's the sort of investment we could keep quietly going with government money, with local authority money, with TOC money, or we could write it into the franchises. Information comes through as the thing people want most, but particularly on an unstaffed station. Where people cannot live with the thought of standing on an unstaffed station and having absolutely no information on what is happening as in that situation. So the indicator, absolutely critical. And if you said to me, what's the biggest thing we've done for customers in the last 10 years, I think it's the revolution in real-time information. How you can move around the system now, knowing what the first, second and third train is, how late they are, where they're calling, when they're coming, etc. And you can get it on your own phone nowadays, or you can get it on the station, or you can get these very cheap plug-in ones, which only cost about £300 to plug in on the unstaffed station. So there is no excuse for leaving people without real-time information now. And yes, of course, as Ashwin says, it can be done even better.